Hello, this is Graham, and in this video we're going to look at one of the more elusive of the qualities that person-centred counsellors try to embody: unconditional positive regard. Our story begins between 3.3 million and 12,000 years ago, when our hunter-gatherer ancestors were scraping their existence together in a very harsh and inhospitable environment. They began to form tribes, groups of mainly related families, living together for safety and to provide sufficient care for the more vulnerable members of their community. If they encountered someone from a different tribe or spotted some in the distance, they needed to react quickly. There wasn't time to think things through, so they went on the basis of assuming danger and not trusting people who were different. Almost any kind of difference shortcut their rational minds and led to an assumption of danger. Similarly, if someone we did trust said something, then we tended to believe them. This became genetically hardwired into their minds and is the basis of most biases today. Prejudice starts when we are very young. We acquire our opinions by learning the norms and values of our family and the society around us as we grow up. From 3 months old, infants are shown to prefer faces from the same racial background as themselves. As we get older, we form our own opinions. We like to think that our society is civilized and tolerant, but in fact we tend to overestimate this. We are also under enormous pressure to conform to society. So our polite spoken opinions often actually differ from our gut feel for a situation. There are tools available to help us assess our own implicit associations or biases. One of them, the implicit association test, is managed by Harvard University and has been since 1998. It measures people's biases and unconscious associations about race, gender, sexuality, and so on. You can register and take the test. It isn't perfect, but it helps you see how you might unintentionally be biased. In 1959, Carl Rogers outlined his idea of self-concept. I sometimes find it helps to turn those words around and make it concept of self. What Rogers was saying was that we each carry around an idea of who we are in our minds. This is capable of changing, but it's made up of the many different messages about us that we have heard in our past. Many of them are directly about us. Graham, you don't seem to smile very much. I don't think you're a very happy person. Others are about the tribes that we belong to. Graham, you're a white male. You'll never understand women, let alone ones from a different culture. If the people around us raise us in an environment where their love for us is limited to when we conform to their expectations, then we only feel good about ourselves when we are doing so. This is conditional positive regard. The alternative is when we are raised in an environment where we are loved regardless of what we do. In this case, we feel secure and confident. The environment, whether supportive or not, defines what Rogers called our conditions of worth. In a later publication, Rogers defined 19 different things that he felt were important for someone to be helped by counselling. These were his 19 prepositions, things that need to be in place before therapy can succeed. In number 16, he points out that anything that is inconsistent with our sense of self will be a threat to the individual. In number 17, he explains that for anyone to change the way that they see themselves, they have to feel completely safe. Carl Rogers produced a subset of 6 of the 19 prepositions, which he called the necessary and sufficient conditions. And from these, he produced 3 core conditions. One of the more important of these was unconditional positive regard. Unconditional positive regard is the acceptance and support of a person regardless of what they say or do. In an environment of unconditional positive regard, every individual has the resources within them to understand themselves and alter their self-concept. Therapists must have hope that change is possible for everyone. Therapists must also be capable of setting aside their own opinions, biases, and judgments. Therapists must also be able to distinguish between the person and their behaviour, to value them regardless of their failings. Let's look at the three words separately. Unconditional means no conditions of acceptance. It's at the opposite pole from a selective, evaluating attitude. Positive means a warm acceptance of the person, a genuine caring for the client. And regard, one regards each aspect of the client's experience as being part of that client. It means caring for the client, but not in a possessive way or in a way as simply to satisfy the therapist's own needs. It means caring for the client as a separate person with permission to have his or her own feelings and his or her own experiences. Many authors have added to these descriptions. Unconditional positive regard is seen as an acceptance of what someone is, not what they might become. It can't be simulated. It requires great skill by the therapist. We cannot offer unconditional positive regard if we are feeling frightened or threatened by our own feelings. Unconditional positive regard is totally unaffected by differences in life experience between the therapist and the client. And finally, the client will have been conditioned not to recognize or believe unconditional positive regard. So they need to test it, and they will be extremely sensitive to lapses and fakes. As Mearns and Thorne have said back in 1988, when you're struggling not to judge someone, you need to focus on your empathy, remind yourself that you cannot possibly know the person yet, and you need to ask yourself what their behaviour is a defence for. Why are they protecting themselves? That then is a description of what unconditional positive regard represents. The most important message to take away is that unconditional positive regard is about the therapist's attitude to their client and to themselves. Unconditional positive regard is an attitude, but it can't be one that we adopt. We can't fake it, and we can't turn it on for one person and off for another. It is a state of being that we aspire to on our own journey to self-actualisation. Thank you.